Lots of advertisers pulled from the site. Musk received criticism from wide swaths of people, including Anti-Defamation League president Jonathan Greenblatt. And if it hasn't been made clear, the post we're talking about is deeply anti-Semitic and generally racist. And that's not just me woking about with my wokers. Elon himself agrees, as he said during the New York Times DealBook Summit.
Look, I'm sorry for that tweet or post. It was foolish of me. Of the 30,000, it might be literally the worst and dumbest post that I've ever done. And I try my best to clarify 6 ways to Sunday. But at least I think over time it will be obvious that, in fact, far from being anti-Semitic, I'm in fact philo-Semitic.
Philo-Semitic! He can't get enough of the Jews. But the important thing to note is that he is sorry. He's not defending the tweet. He said, literally, it's the worst and dumbest post he's ever made. And that's saying a lot. Long list of bad tweets, Elon-y. It's also insulting to all his fans whose memes he steals. And come on, Elon's tried his best to clarify the post 6 ways from Sunday. Except, has he? After the initial backlash to his worst post ever, he posted, "This past week, there were hundreds of bogus media stories claiming that I am anti-Semitic. Nothing could be further from the truth. I wish only the best for humanity and a prosperous and exciting future for all." And then he explained why he posted it. He said what the actual truth about the Jewish community is that he thought he was agreeing with. But as The Hill notes, Musk, in his post Sunday, denied accusations of anti-Semitism, but he did not provide any further explanation for the post. An explanation never came, but to his credit, he apologized and went to Israel, and then a few months later he went to Auschwitz, and he's sorry is the point. Except...
So you said you learned your lesson. What did you learn?
I said I learned my lesson?
You said you learned your lesson when you apologized, and you said you went to Auschwitz, you saw what...
No, I was already aware of these things. And the nature of my comment that really inflamed people, what I was trying to say, and I did very quickly clarify, this is what I'm saying, is that a number of prominent Jewish philanthropists fund groups that they should really take a closer look at funding, because some of the groups they fund, I think, are anti-Semitic.
Wait, what? I thought it was foolish, and you were sorry, and it's the worst and dumbest post you've ever made. Why are you so mad that he's asking what you, the fool who apologized for their dumb mistake, learned from it? But alright, no lesson learned, and the explanation is that you saw someone say that Jewish communities have been pushing white hate and supporting hordes of incoming minorities who are all anti-Semitic, and you thought, responding, "This is the actual truth," communicated that some Jewish philanthropists fund groups that are anti-Semitic. Well, I guess that was foolish. You're right. Bad job. I'm glad you're sorry, but really mad about it, apparently. He so obviously just means Soros, too. It's so... What a guy. But Sawi is Sawi. Like us, we're sorry, because we have to get to, thank goodness, we get to go to a quick ad for, I don't know, emotional surveillance or vitamin cookies or whatever. And when we come back, we will talk about, please be Star Wars, please be Star Wars, please be Star Wars, please be Star Wars. It's Hitler! Alright.
Oh my god, I had to pee so bad. Hi. Hey, okay. Focus, Katie, focus. Ads. Hi. I want to talk to you about Hungry Root. Have you struggled with balancing work and life and fun and also shopping for and preparing and cooking healthy meals while trying to schedule pee breaks? Well, Hungry Root is an easy way to get fresh and high-quality groceries delivered right to your door. God, I should not have drank all that rainwater. Woof, lesson learned. Okay, we're almost done here. They even customize their recipes and groceries around your needs. They have this short and fun little quiz where you can tell them your personal health goals, food you like, and even what appliances you have, and they recommend stuff based on all those results. Man, I just have to keep all those jars away from the desk. They're taunting me. Okay, halfway done now. Halfway done! Listen, Hungry Root has everything you need, from produce and meat and seafood and snacks. Seafood snacks? I don't know, ready-made meals. Whatever you can get at a grocery store, they have. You can even get beverages. Shouldn't have mentioned beverages. Can't think about liquid right now. My point is that they pride themselves on having great tasting food that's made with trusted ingredients. And I gotta tell you, I genuinely love it. I love my Hungry Root. I can't wait to eat my Hungry Root. And right now, Hungry Root is offering Some More News listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/morenews to get 40% off your first delivery and your free veggies. That's right. Go to hungryroot.com/morenews. Do not forget to use our link so they know we sent you, and then they shower us in praise and more ad buys. Okay, gotta run. It's time to go.
That's just racism and broken Cybertrucks. Ugh. Hey, folks, welcome back. We were just talking about how Elon Musk is a bit of a Nazi, bold typeface sympathizer. You can't get mad at Elon, all right? Hear me out. Okay, so we've heard a bit about what Elon and also literally Hitler say and have said. But obviously, it's important to look at what he does and has done. Instead of saying the words National Socialism and then the words case closed, we can open a fucking book. We probably have to, considering the intense claim we're making. That Elon Musk is a Nazi sympathizer, or at the very least, definitely would have been one. Not a Nazi per se, although, much like a Nazi, Elon, neither right nor left Musk, has actually said he's a socialist while crushing unions. This is why it's so absurd when some billionaire industrialist who grew up during apartheid says that the Nazis were socialist lefties, actually. Aside from everything we've already talked about and how there were no co-ops and there was no wealth redistribution for the lower classes, the Nazis also, to be clear, killed all the f***ing socialists. It's not just that they weren't left-wing, they were aggressive and hostile towards workers and the left wing of the party in the early days. And then they killed them. It's how that poem starts. Because again, it's important to listen to what's said, but also, if not more so, to what they did. Where did they position themselves even, as in physically? During this period in Weimar, the Reichstag was seated by political positioning. There are the communists on the left, and over on the right is the conservative and monarchist German National People's Party, the major nationalist party before the rise of the Nazis, who have positioned themselves a little over to the side, up and in the back. That's 1928. Here's 1930. There are all the Nazis on the right. And you know, it went from there. Point is, it's not just that they weren't for socialism. They were actively against it. As Shirer writes throughout Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, the disenfranchised lower classes were demanding the ballot, and the workers were insisting on the right to organize trade unions and to strike, not only for higher wages and better working conditions, but to gain their democratic political ends. Indeed, a general strike had finally brought universal manhood suffrage, and with this, the end of political dominance by the Austrian Germans, who numbered but a third of the population of the Austrian half of the empire. To these developments, Hitler, the fanatical young German-Austrian nationalist from Linz, was bitterly opposed. To him, the empire was sinking into foul morass. And Anton Drexler, a locksmith by trade, who may be said to have been the actual founder of National Socialism, had set up a committee of independent workmen to combat the Marxism of the free trade unions. And a number of big industrialists were beginning to become financially interested in Hitler's reborn movement precisely because it promised to be effective in combating the communists, the socialists, and the trade unions. And as the 20s neared their end, money started to flow into the Nazi Party from a few of the big Bavarian and Rhineland industrialists who were attracted by Hitler's opposition to the Marxists and the trade unions. And Nazi Otto Strasser had supported certain strikes of the socialist trade unions and demanded that the party come out for nationalization of industry. This, of course, was heresy to Hitler, who accused Otto Strasser of professing the cardinal sins of democracy and liberalism. In fact, a document which came to light at Nuremberg shows that the Nazis had been planning for some time to destroy the trade unions. And if history could not have been clearer on the fact that the National Socialists obviously lied about socialism and then completely abandoned it, we thusly turn to May 1st, 1933. The Nazis proclaimed May Day a national holiday for workers. There was an enormous celebration exalting the worker with fanfare and speeches about how the socialists are divisive and mean. Then, of course, the next day, on May 2nd, the trade union headquarters throughout the country were occupied, union funds confiscated, the unions dissolved, and the leaders arrested. Many were beaten and lodged in concentration camps. And within 3 weeks, the hollowness of another Nazi promise was exposed when Hitler decreed a law bringing an end to collective bargaining and providing that henceforth labor trustees appointed by him would regulate labor contracts and maintain labor peace. The law, in effect, outlawed strikes. The head of the German Labor Front, Robert Ley, promised to restore absolute leadership to the natural leader of a factory, that is, the employer. Only the employer can decide. Many employers have for years had to call for the master in the house. Now, they are once again to be the master in the house. The Nazis established the so-called Labor Front, which in theory replaced the old trade unions and did not represent the worker. Indeed, it was in reality a vast propaganda organization and, as some workers said, a gigantic fraud. Its aim, as stated in the law, was not to protect the worker, but to create a true social and productive community of all Germans. Its task is to see that every single individual should be able to perform the maximum of work. And so, of course, workers' wages fell, and indeed, deprived of his trade unions, collective bargaining, and the right to strike, the German worker in the Third Reich became an industrial serf, bound to his master, the employer, much as medieval peasants had been bound to the lord of the manor. In case it's not clear to you yet, Peterson and Elon's fans and reply guys specifically, this isn't a case of, well, the National Socialists killed the other socialists because that's what socialists do to those who aren't the right kind of socialist. There goes the tolerant left, killing socialists. No, this is a case of Hitler and his Nazis being against basic foundations and mechanisms of socialism. So why am I hammering this point so hard? Do we have a clip of the hammer? Cool. What about a little metal ball?
Sure.
Yeah, so we're talking about this because it's important to recognize that a billionaire industrialist saying that the Nazis were socialist actually, and one of the bad things about the Nazis is that they were so far left socialist, is just Nazi propaganda. He is a capitalist, one of the richest people on the planet in fact, lying for Nazis, literally saying the Nazis' lies. It's not surprising, industrialists and capitalists will of course side against labor. It's not complicated. The Nazis crushed the workers and exalted the bosses. Which brings us back to the hammering. Bad job, truck. That's a Ford. If we want to see this connection between the Nazis and capitalism and private enterprise, look no further than Henry Ford. Yes, Musk's car daddy, his paw-tomobile. The president of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, who, as mentioned, has criticized both Musk specifically and his X platform generally, ironically praised Musk when he first bought Twitter.
I mean, look, as we've talked about before, Elon Musk is an amazing entrepreneur, an extraordinary innovator. He's the Henry Ford of our time.
Indeed, Ford was a great success in the automotive industry, and despite propaganda saying that he was supportive of workers, he was massively and actively anti-union and anti-labor, as seen during the Battle of the Overpass, when Ford's security force and local police attacked the United Auto Workers Union. Musk hasn't gone that far, but hey, he'll get there someday. Musk's positions are vocally anti-union. He thinks that they create a lords and peasants sort of thing, and that unions naturally try to create negativity at a company. Incidentally, on the fake May Day celebration before destroying all the unions, Hitler gave a pre-rally speech to some youths and complained about how the socialists turned May Day into a symbol of class conflict, of never-ending strife and discord. Unions are divisive, see. We gotta do class collaboration with me, the absurdly wealthy boss. Stop conflicting with me, the boss shouted at his workers, demanding better treatment. Anyway, we can see Elon's disrespect and even contempt for workers via his shirking of safety regulations because he doesn't like the color yellow, and the demand he puts on his workers, his general hostility towards unions and collective bargaining, his current case along with Amazon and Trader Joe's to abolish the National Board of Labor Relations. Although, according to a former NLRB field attorney, there is apparently case law that it is a violation of federal labor law to sue as a means to prevent organizing and bargaining. So, we'll see. Maybe they'll just sue him back for being such a bad boss, because as a boss, the experience under Elon Musk is an endless scroll of impulse firings, retribution, tone deafness on race, and the impregnation of a subordinate. Further, Tesla investigators hired by Musk allegedly hacked an employee's phone and spied on his messages, and the stridently anti-union Musk reportedly hired a public relations firm to investigate an employee Facebook group just as Tesla workers were trying to unionize. Odd paranoia and anti-worker sounds just like Ford, who, in addition to being deeply anti-union, created a network of company spies who surveilled his employees and tried to control their lives. They've both bought and owned propaganda platforms that they used to engage in conspiracy mongering and racism. They have both had conflict with the ADL, though Ford's anti-Semitism was much more overt and deliberate than Musk's, as Ford was distributing publications like The International Jew, The World's Problem. While the ADL at the time published articles debunking these claims, eventually Ford was sued for defamation by a Jewish lawyer named Aaron Sapiro. That ordeal ended in a mistrial and embarrassed Ford to the point that he shut down his publication. Musk, too, has an issue with and history of defaming people and making baseless accusations, more than a few. Literally, he was being deposed in one of these cases the week we filmed this. Ironically, he's being sued for falsely accusing some random guy of being a neo-Nazi. Unfortunately, this defamation has so far not led Elon to follow in Ford's embarrassed footsteps and shut down the whole operation. Shut it down, Lonnie! Shut it down! Like Musk, after his anti-Semitic Xing scandal, Ford too went on a bit of a quarter-baked apology tour, although, to be fair, Elon claims his wasn't an apology tour. And to be balanced, Ford's apology tour didn't take. But now, am I saying that Elon Musk is as pro-Nazi as Henry Ford was? Not necessarily. I mean, Ford was literally friends with and a collaborator with Hitler, the Adolf one. There's no way to know, but probably not. Perhaps Elon is more of a sympathetic, wormy guy who just needs his cookies, as American conservative patriot and proto-fascist Donald J. Trump pointed out on competing website Truth Social. When Elon Musk came to the White House asking me for help on all of his many subsidized projects, whether it's electric cars that don't drive long enough, driverless cars that crash, or rocket ships to nowhere, without which subsidies he'd be worthless, and telling me how he was a big Trump fan and Republican, I could have said, drop to your knees and beg, and he would have done it. Now Elon should focus on getting himself out of the Twitter mess, because he could owe $44 billion for something that's perhaps worthless. Funny guy. I'm merely pointing out some key similarities that lend themselves to alignment, to collaboration, to a mutually beneficial, at least financially, relationship. Musk is primed to sympathize with and even support a fascist party. One does not need to be as racist and awful as literal Nazis in order to be a billionaire industrialist who appreciates how much a political party is against unions and turns a blind eye. But there's more to it, obviously. We've been focusing so much on stuff that dopes like Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson are making us focus on because they have to pretend and waste everybody's time. So I guess we should finally get more into the explicitly nationalist, racist aspects of what we're talking about. Musk, of course, grew up in South African apartheid. He hasn't spoken much on the topic, although according to his weird, awful pisshead of a father, he and the rest of his siblings knew something was off and didn't like it. He also said Elon liked black people, as evidenced by his, quote, good relationship with their domestic staff. Fancy. And to be fair and balanced, there are some nice stories from people about how Elon was generally against the concept, and even once stood up to someone who used a slur. It was very woke of him, actually. Oh, interesting. He was apparently bullied for it, and I guess he never cared about slurs again. Maybe that's his anti-woke Joker moment. Woker! Absolutely not. Anyway, I bring all of that up for context as we talk about how at one of his factories, 240 black factory workers allege the automaker of rampant racism and mistreatment at the Bay Area plant. Almost 6,000 workers could be a part of the lawsuit altogether. Quote, the individual testimonies are part of a 2017 lawsuit brought by Marcus Vaughn, who complained in writing to Human Resources and to Tesla CEO Elon Musk of a hostile work environment in which he was called slurs by coworkers and supervisors. No investigation was conducted, and he was fired for not having a positive attitude. There have been multiple cases like this with other employees. California sued Tesla in state court alleging ignored racist abuse and that Elon told workers to be thick-skinned about racial harassment. Although in the actual email about being thick-skinned, he describes the alleged racial harassment as being a jerk. Really addressing the issue head on there, Lonnie. Last September, a federal agency sued Tesla for similar and even worse claims of discrimination and racism. A jury awarded a former black contract worker for Tesla $3 million, originally $137 million, after they found that Tesla had failed to protect him from racial harassment. There are hundreds of workers with accusations like this who have requested to sue Tesla. So what gives? Has Elon ever spoken about these many, many cases and accusations? It doesn't seem so. But I thought he was the CEO, the big guy. The buck stops there, right?
Doesn't the buck stop with you? I mean, you're
John, I have to say, choose your question carefully. There's 5 minutes left.
okay, but so
Is this the question you want to ask?
The same question is you said that they are killing the company, but you're the head of the company. The buck doesn't stop with you. And I'm not trying to upset you.
Well, you are upsetting me because the way you're phrasing the questions, I think, is not cogent.
It's not what?
Not cogent.
Cogent.
Yes.
Whoa, damn, you okay, bud? Now, that's actually a question about him blaming advertisers for the potential demise of his terrible website after he made that anti-Semitic tweet that he admitted was bad. It's just funny that the most basic ass interview 101 question to ask a controversial or scandal-adjacent leader in business or politics or media is, doesn't the buck stop with you? What a mild, even expected question to snap at. Now, it would have been interesting if Don asked about this documented history of racism at his factories so Musk could finally speak on it. Are all of these hundreds of people and those other hundreds of people and the juries and court officials simply too woke? Maybe. Are they lying? Is Elon lying? He's lied before about his family having no relation to an emerald mine when he was growing up, and he's acted baffled about the very idea, despite mentioning it in several past interviews, even talking in an interview about when he and his father rode in a plane full of guns to the emerald mine. He can be found spouting misinformation and taking credit for other people's ideas. Maybe he's secretly too woke. Maybe the Nazi left is forcing him to be woke. Maybe Elon is a victim of dastardly diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that force his factories to engage in, allow, and ignore allegedly pretty severe racism. It does seem like it runs in the family, as his brother Kimball's company was also dealing with racism, then disbanded their DEI council, then illegally fired workers who were trying to unionize. Are we still talking about Nazis and stuff? What's going on? All right, okay, when we get back, we can all finally enjoy a segment I'm provocatively calling Elon Musk's Hitler Problem. Until then, enjoy this ad for ourselves.
Welcome to this ad. Also, do you hate ads? You just want to throw your computer in a rage every time you see one, and now you're going broke buying all those new computers? Well, buddy, I have a solution for you. And that's patreon.com/somemore-news. For just $5 human a month, you get early access to both Some More News and Even More News completely ad-free. No more breaking computers for you, unless that's your hobby. And for a little bit more, you can get a producer credit in our episode, or even join a monthly hangout with me and the rest of the crew. But mostly me. Come talk with us about your computer smashing fetish, you pervert. Well, we love you, but you're a pervert. Get over yourself. Once again, that's patreon.com/somemore-news for ad-free episodes of this show you are currently experiencing. One more time for the people in the back. Patreon.com/somemore-news. Check it out.
Hey, welcome back. We were just talking about the dangers of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, I guess. By doing anti-racism, you're actually doing reverse racism against the whites, and it collapses bridges because of incompetent minorities and all that. The leftist racism of the radical Biden administration, etc. You know the story. Also, Elon Musk has a Hitler problem. But before we get to that, DEI.
If the test for a doctor is lowered, then the probability of them making a mistake and killing someone is obviously going to be higher.
Wait, say that again. I'm not sure I understand what you said.
If the standards for passing medical exams and becoming a doctor, or especially something like a surgeon, if the standards are lowered, then the probability that the surgeon will make a mistake is higher. They're making mistakes in their exam. They may make mistakes with people, and that may result in people dying.
What evidence do you have, though, that they're lowering the standards? There's no evidence of that.
I believe there is.
There's no evidence of that, Elon. What is the evidence?
I believe they have literally lowered the standards at Duke University, and that is what the article was referring to.
There's no
Are you
evidence
saying they have
of that.
not lowered the standards?
There's no evidence about lowering standards, and I think that there is.
I believe that is a false statement you're making.
Okay, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I think
the interesting thing is, when this is posted on the X platform, there will be a whole bunch of things that rebut what you said and what I said. The X platform that people will reply to it with evidence.
Okay.
And maybe I'm wrong. Let's see.
Okay. So, but that's my whole thing about moderation.
If we lower the standards for what it takes to become a doctor,
You're saying if we lower the standards,
Yes.
but do you believe people are dying because the standards are being lowered?
I don't
Or have
think
been
that
lowered?
is yet an issue, but it could become an issue.
Okay.
If the standards, like let's say, I think that particular thing was referring to surgeons. Let's say a surgeon is asked to, a surgeon in training is asked to do a series of operations under the supervision of a senior surgeon, and they get a bunch of those operations wrong. If that happens, and yet they are still approved to be a surgeon, the probability that someone will die, I think, at some point is high.
Okay. I understand that, but that's a hypothetical. That doesn't mean it's happening.
I didn't say it's happening.
You didn't say it was happening.
I said it will. I said if we lower standards, people will die.
You think they're lowering the standards for minority doctors or women doctors, or?
That's what that's what that article suggested. Yes.
You might notice that Elon is concerned about the lowering of hiring standards to accommodate black people and women, an on-its-face bigoted statement and assumption. He says that it is happening, but then also that it's not happening. But imagine if it was. Well, that would be bad to do, which Don Lemon agrees with. Lemon tries to explain that he's implying that in order to hire more qualified minorities and women, standards of intelligence and competence need to be lowered. Upon pushback, instead of giving a single example, just one example of it happening, he says, check the comments. During a live interview about a topic that this allegedly brilliant thought genius thinks and posts about all fucking day. What is it with these guys who talk and care so much about shit they cannot talk about? He does this same vague but aggressive wish-wash elsewhere in the interview about how the Democrats are purposely bringing in tens of thousands of illegal immigrants so that they can get more seats in the House of Representatives via the census and also get them to illegally vote for them, thus eventually forming a one-party state, the Democrat states of Hellmerica. This conspiracy...
I didn't call it a conspiracy. I just said that there's a simple matter of incentives. You don't need a conspiracy when you have basic incentives. In my view, there's a basic incentive that is fundamental that for the Democrat Party to foster and usher in a large number of illegals. And you don't need a conspiracy in that case because you have a very basic incentive. You could say I'm wrong about that incentive, but that's my view. I'm not buying into buying some great replacement theory. I'm simply saying there appears to be a very clear incentive for Democrats to maximize the number of illegals because it helps them win elections.
So an incentive is what leads to a motivation to do something. In this case, something that is illegal, his word, and secretly coordinated between multiple parties. Do we have a clip of that? Anyway, I wonder if there's an incentive to gin up fear about immigrants too. I wonder if that helps anyone in an election. Interesting point from Elon about incentive that maybe applies to everything in this episode. But getting on with it, to be clear, standards aren't being lowered in order to hire black people and women. In fact, one example our bandmate Ben Shapiro tried to bring up about Duke Medical School was refuted by pointing out that as diversity went up at the school, so did GPAs. Diversity is good, but when these people are talking about DEI, to be clear, the narrative on the right and from Elon was that forced diversity in hiring at airlines was causing poor performance and more mistakes and accidents because they had to lower standards in order to hire black people and women. And they were obviously unqualified. It's not the cutbacks and lax quality control at Boeing's plants. No, it's the whatever race you want to think is inferior's fault, actually. Because racism is just so convenient. In fact, all of this DEI stuff allegedly stems, of course, from what you have been waiting for. Wokeness. Some clownish jackanapes call it the woke mind virus, but we all know what I'm talking about when I say woke, right? Or do we? That's actually the claim, right? That nobody can define woke. Often it's just a vague boogeyman. Or it's just the latest version of social justice warrior or politically correct. It's CRT, it's DEI, it's cultural Marxism, it's postmodern neo-Marxism. But no, dear viewer, it is so much more than that. And to really explain it in a clear way that definitely isn't those other things, we're going to go to the gladiator of explaining stuff, Ben Shapiro.
I think that wokeism has its roots in postmodernism, which essentially suggests that every principle is a reflection of underlying structures of power, and that therefore any inequality that emerges under such a system is a reflection, again, of that structure of power. And that got transmuted into sort of a racial version of postmodernism, in which the systems of the United States are white supremacist in orientation and are perpetuated by a group of people who are, in fact, in favor of the preservation of white power and white supremacy. That is the generalized theory of critical race theory.
Okay, so that's a little vague, actually, and too generalized, and his disdain at this definition implies that he thinks there's no effect from racism or America's racist history of slavery and all that. But a good faith interpretation is that he basically thinks the adjustments or laws made to account for racism are in themselves racist, and viewing everything through a lens of victimhood is unhealthy for individuals and societies because it undermines the alleged meritocracy that we were founded on. Meritocracy and chattel slavery. The problem, like many of Ben's strawman arguments, is that according to his interpretation of and fight against wokeness, to the woke, any inequalities are the fault of a system of power dynamics, and to him, therefore none are. He also, interestingly, claims that wokeness has its roots in postmodernism, and was originally a Marxism focused on economics, socialism, communism, etc. But it got warped into being Marxist about culture and race. Now, this might sound familiar to you. Rephrased by an equally voicey voice,
you couldn't be a Marxist and claim that you were a human being by the end of the 1960s. And so they started to play a sleight of hand, and instead of pitting the proletariat, the working class, against the bourgeoisie, they started to pit the oppressor, the oppressed against the oppressor. And that opened up the avenue to identifying any number of groups as oppressed and oppressor, and to continue the same narrative under a different name. It was no longer specifically about economics.
Huh. Okay, so postmodern neo-Marxism actually sounds an awful lot like wokeness. But surely,
Horkheimer quickly began to use the Institute to develop a new Marxism, very different from the Marxism of the Soviet Union. First, recognizing the economic success of capitalism, Horkheimer announced that revolution was unlikely to come from the working class. The Frankfurt School would have to find a substitute.
Well, this was the great question. The great question is there a surrogate for the working class?
The Frankfurt School would not find an answer to this question until the 1960s. But meanwhile, Horkheimer moved to revive Lukács's work by making the culture, not the economy, the central focus of the Frankfurt School's work.
so that's a little old documentary about political correctness and how it comes from a group of German Jewish academics called the Frankfurt School. See, they took economic Marxism, right? And get this, they pushed it through a cultural lens. And it's destroying Western civilization, see? It's the same damn thing. Wokeness is just cultural Marxism, is just social justice warriors, is just postmodern neo-Marxism, is just political correctness, is just, well, eventually probably the Jews' fault, apparently. But I don't want to put words in their mouths. There are already enough weird ones in there. Cultural Marxism, of course, also appears in some terrorist manifestos, like that of the Poway shooter who blamed the Jews for destroying Europe with cultural Marxism and communism. Cultural Marxism was the main topic of the manifesto of far-right terrorist Anders Breivik. Cultural Marxism is not necessarily to be confused with cultural Bolshevism, which is what the Nazis called anything they didn't like, but specifically secular, modernist, and progressive cultural movements, and attacks on conceptions of family, identity, music, art, and intellectual life. But don't worry, cultural Bolshevism is also not to be confused with Jewish Bolshevism, which is the, wouldn't you know it, Nazi conspiracy theory that 1917's Russian Revolution was specifically a Jewish plot to, wouldn't you know it, destroy Western civilization. Here's Elon saying the Bolsheviks killed a lot of Russians, and here are the scores of Elon's little wiener Nazi accounts, some of which he's interacted with, really urging him to make that last step to saying who the Bolsheviks were. Nothing to see here, I'm sure. Anyway, that terrified doll man talking about cultural Marxism and political correctness is William Lind, who, according to the SPLC, in 2002 gave a speech at a Holocaust deniers convention where he blamed cultural Marxists for political correctness and other evils and said they were all Jewish and their whole plan is the destruction of Western culture. I'm not saying Musk or Peterson or whomever mean the exact same thing when they use the term, but, you know, maybe consider a rebrand. Oh, right, they did. It's woke now. I forgot why we were talking about this. Let's see if Elon can describe wokeness.
I'm interested in your opinions too. But, you know, like, I mean, generally, I think we should be aiming for, like, a positive society and, you know, that it should be okay to, you know, be humorous, like, you know, like we should, like wokeness basically wants to make comedy illegal, which is not cool.
So, political correctness, that's just political correctness. Here's some more.
At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a reason, it gives them a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue.
Well, that's just social justice warrior, the meanies. If you were to want specifics, maybe a more detailed or nuanced definition, you're not going to get it from Elon Musk. He talks about wokeness vaguely to a fault, to the detriment of any clarity or usefulness. But the emotions are clear. These woke people with the woke mind virus are evil and out to get you and your precious society. The woke mind virus via entertainment is leading civilization to suicide? But how? I thought wokeness in entertainment was like Snow White being only half white and a Pixar character's moms showing romantic affection in the background for 2 seconds. Suicide? of the civilization? Because of wokeness in Hollywood? I mean, benefit of the doubt, maybe there's an explanation there, but he doesn't offer one. You might notice that I mentioned the woke mind virus specifically, and not just wokeness. Yes, you've heard of it. You love hearing about it. You can't stop not shutting up about loving hearing about it. It's the woke mind virus. Clap, 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 clap. But what is WMV? I've heard woke on its own before, as well as the word mind and virus and the phrase mind virus. But what means them when their powers combined?
I mean, you have talked about this woke mind virus.
Yes.
In really apocalyptic terms.
Yeah.
You should explain why you don't think it's hyperbole to say things like it's pushing civilization towards suicide. First of all, what is the woke mind virus? And if we don't deal with this, nothing else can get done. Tell me why you think that.
I think we need to be very cautious about anything that is anti-meritocratic, and anything that is that results in the suppression of free speech. So, those are two of the aspects of the woke mind virus that I think are very dangerous. Is that it's often anti-meritocratic. You can't question things. Even the questioning is bad. Another way to almost synonymous would be cancel culture. And obviously people have tried to cancel you many times.
Many times.
Yeah, I mean...
Every week.
Yeah.
From left and right. I've had it from both sides.
Okay, so I'm just gonna cut him off there. Good lord. All that happens next is they jerk each other off for being able to complain about how the world is changing around them. And then Musk tries to say that he's clearly not far right because his multi-billion-dollar company makes electric cars. Great point about politics, Elon. But regarding that clip, first of all, I like how cancel culture is apparently a huge problem because Bill Maher gets canceled every week by the left and the right, but they say it on HBO to millions of people every week, despite getting canceled every week, except we're watching it right now. You're on it right now. How boring. But more to the point, we got a little bit of a definition there from Elon. That's great. Again, it's this idea of being anti-meritocratic. I wonder why the richest guy on the planet needs to think that everything is based on merit. So surely wokeness is bad. Those two annoying pricks say so. But to what end? When confronted about the dangers of DEI, he seems to flounder quite a bit and rely on the eventual comments that will prove black people and women are less qualified for stuff or whatever. But he did clarify later about the potential dangers of woke AI pushing diversity, so maybe that will help elucidate. A friend of mine suggested that I clarify the nature of the danger of woke AI, especially forced diversity. If an AI is programmed to push for diversity at all costs, as Google Gemini was, then it will do whatever it can to cause that outcome, potentially even killing people. Okay, see, that actually doesn't clarify anything. One of the dangers of any AI is that it will do whatever it can to cause an outcome, potentially even killing people. You didn't explain how the people would die, Elon. Do you think everyone's f***ing stupid? F*** you for thinking you said anything there. Well, just to clarify, the nature of the danger of blank. If an AI is programmed to do blank at all costs, then it will do whatever it can to cause that blank outcome, potentially even killing people. Amazing insight. When Elon says woke, he admittedly knows what he means way less than the people who talk their way into defining it as cultural Marxism. But it's all kind of the same shit.